You're a startup founder. You think your product is amazing and feel like more people should be buying, but the road is long and slow. It feels like you're stuck. There's always one thing I ask startup founders. Have you talked to your customers? They almost always say, heck yes, we talk to our customers all the time. But what I find is they're either selling or trying to improve their product. These are not customer-focused conversations. If we can get curious about our customers, then we can uncover critical insights that will help us build to the next round. I'm Anna Firmenov, and welcome to Building with Buyers, a show about startup growth where I'll explore how customers help startups build to the next round. Hannah, it's been a while. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I'm so glad. I was asking you to come on to the show and I kept asking and you're like, at this time I can't, at this time, not a good time. And then finally you were like, let's do this. So
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to have you.
No, thank you for being so patient with me. My year's been it's been a bit all over the place, but I'm excited. I'm really excited to be here and to chat with you.
Good. Same here. So Hannah Shamji is a former therapist and now consumer psychology researcher. Of course, that's clearly why you're here on the show. You and I both dig deep to uncover emotional and at times psychological reasons that customers will buy something or they won't buy something, or why are they staying for the long haul, or maybe they're leaving. It was not the right product for them, right? In order to help inform things like retention, engagement, or positioning challenges. But you have this really unique background with being a former therapist, and I actually took your course called Beyond the Script, Master the Art and Psychology of Customer Interviews. And that's where I got to know you better. And it was a really great course. The big thing that I got from that course is really how to continue to think about digging deep, not just asking the question I want answered, but then I listen to the response. What does that mean? Is that it? Or is there more to this, right? So that's part of it. The other part of it is creating a safe space right at the beginning of the conversation, creating that safe space that really left an impression on me and actually helped me have like a 90-minute conversation with someone. I think I told you that. I never had a 90-minute conversation with a customer before, but that was the moment. So Hannah, welcome to the show. And so I'd love to talk about, what are you focused on these days at work? We were kind of chit-chatting before I pressed record and you were like, there are some shifts in the business. I'd love to learn more about what those are.
Yeah. So personally, I have shifted. I was doing a bit of like the cohort, which is what you are a part of, and some like training, less like corporate training and more like, I guess, public training, like live courses, that type of thing, as well as client work. And I shifted gears, I would say, in the past couple of months where I was doing that plus client work. And now I've decided to focus more exclusively on client work and pull back from the workshops and webinars and cohorts.
Why did you decide to do that? Just curious, because I found your workshop super helpful.
Thank you. I'm really glad. I think that I find I have a lot more fun in the weeds with clients. I'd run the workshop that you were a part of a few times and it was fun, but it's a different kind of fun. And I think there was also a bit of like metric chasing that I was doing. And it feels like a flashy thing to say that I can have this course, which I think is totally okay, but I wasn't enjoying it as much as the client, like solving problems with clients in real time. And I think my brain needs to have something to focus on. Like there needs to be some sort of priority order, or I'm just too split. And clients was always kind of underneath. And I thought, let me lead with this. And there was some ownership with like having your own cohort and course and workshops that is different to when you have clients. Like you're the one that can decide when it is and drum up all the excitement. But with clients, I just found that like the actual work was more a different kind of stimulating. And I really enjoy the like kind of fail fast, figure it out in real time environment. So I've shifted there for now. It doesn't mean I'm not going to do the courses at all, but they've become a lower priority and maybe like a pop up I'll do as and when. But clients been much more of my focus and I'm having a lot of fun with it. And to your question of like, what do clients need?
Yeah. What do companies desperately need these days?
I think it's shifting. Like in the beginning, when I started doing qualitative research for companies, it was a very specific type of company or even person that was in leadership and wanted research. It seems like the net's a little bit wider now. There's more conversations and interactions with folks that like companies that might even have a research team and then it just like didn't work out or with cuts and layoffs, they had to like axe the whole team but still see a need for research. So I think there's more and more, it's becoming a bigger buzzword of like, how do we differentiate in a way that's actually stand out and lasting, especially with AI in the room and everything in execution can happen a lot faster. Like, where do you stand ahead? Right. And this seems to be an area of like, oh, well, I can just get closer to the customer than anyone else. And that way, that understanding can have a trickle out effect across the company. That's kind of the dialogue that I'm seeing happen and being an opening for research to be like, oh, it's not just numbers. This qualitative side is super, super important. So in a sense, AI, I think, has helped like forward that conversation around like differentiating and getting noticed.
Yeah, because people are kind of nodding their heads, right? It sounds like people are nodding their heads that like AI is giving us the ability to scale some stuff and the ability to do more with less. But the hard work is conversation. Like real humans need to be involved in that. There's critical thinking you can't give to the AI tool. And so I wanted to hold off on talking about that, but I was going to ask you like the impact of AI on your work these days. Is the conversation kind of around like, yeah, we get it. Like this is the work that we can't just give to the tools. You need to come in, Hannah, and you need to be the human part of the process and actually have these conversations because I think that that's the stance that I've been taking. I don't know if that's actually how companies are treating qualitative research.
Yeah, I think there's like a bit of a spectrum. I find that for some, they're using AI as a placeholder to do research, and others are like doing research, but it's a tag onto their existing job, so they don't have the skill or the know-how to go as deep. And then for others, like research is more in practice. So they're not like doing research and then doing, they're doing and using the doing to learn what works and sticks and doesn't. And that's kind of their research. I think it depends on like company maturity and stage and resources and all of those variables. But I think that there is a huge acceptance of that, well, going deep is now a thing that a human can do that AI can't, that you need to feed AI the right tools to do better as opposed to rely on it to like completely excavate everything you need. I feel like we've all had so many blunders with or like fights with our own like chat GPT in some form of like research or analysis that it's like, no, I literally just told you it's not this. Can you focus on that? Like it's just not
A
as
lot of time spent on that back and forth and like,
Mhm.
no, I told you that 10 times. Stop it again. Oh, I'm so frustrated. I just spent 2 hours on
So
this. And then you
funny.
just like do it yourself. I know, I've been there.
Totally, right? And it still has a ceiling because there's a difference between like the theory or the psychology of a person and then like how do you actually apply that? How do you actually get that insight and bring it forward? So I tend to use it more as like a thinking partner. I'm trying to hash something out and I need to like pull it apart. Or if I want to translate some of my qualitative insights to quantitative, like how many people did X or how many people talked about Y? that's really great as like a thinking partner or like a research assistant type, but that's kind of where it plugs in as opposed to takes over.
Yeah, totally. What are you helping companies with? Like, is it research to help inform positioning messaging? Is it research to help inform retention and how they can better retain customers? Is it research to help inform how the heck are we going to do our go-to market, engage people with our content? Like, what have you been finding this year as like the focus from your research?
So I've done more product research lately
Interesting.
where I'm informing, the product strategy tied to like retention. So the goal is we need the app to be stickier, but how do we do that? Previously, it's been like marketing first, and I've been informing like marketing and campaigns. And I've seen a shift more to like product and then positioning because of product. With product comes like design and engineering as well. I'm really enjoying that space because it's much more, the application can feel a lot more tangible. Like you actually have to make a decision on how to represent this in a particular feature, which I really like. And that means that their questions of the research are also a little bit more specific because they have to make more concrete decisions.
So that's like a product researcher. So now you're really going like less around maybe, I wouldn't say it's all marketing because like retention, engagement, like that's business strategy stuff. But now you're really going for the like product strategy stuff.
Yeah. And actually, I think it would overlay that with a little bit more of the business strategy. I think those have been much louder this year than the messaging marketing. It's almost like that felt like less exclusive. It's been an interesting shift. I haven't actually thought about it that way, but that's kind of just what's fallen into my lap.
Do product people, like head of product or product managers, don't they do that research? Or is it at like, how does this work? Because if you come in and do this work, then what are the product people doing? Isn't that their job? Have they been, you tell me, because I'm just learning.
No, it's a good question. So it depends. In this particular company I'm with right now, research should be a component of product, like an exercise that they do, but I don't think it's been as top of mind. That's one. And two, a lot of the research that folks have done has been so siloed. And in this case, I'm just speaking about this one client right now because they're top of mind. They needed like a foundational piece of research to figure out like why are folks even hiring this particular app. And so that would have a trickle out effect across everyone. And so part of bringing me in was to like remove the natural bias you might assume someone has if they're from product and their research is going to inform like design or engineering. So then I could come in as like, well, I'll speak to all of those needs. Part of their challenge is now how do we get research top of mind for the folks that need it? And I think this is a conversation where I like to show like I'll sit down with it like a VP of product and figure out like, well, where do you need research? And like if something is like high impact and you don't have a lot of knowledge about it, it's great to have a researcher own it as a big chunk. But if it's lower impact, you have some knowledge, that's probably better to feed to like the product team or product managers, and they can roll it into the work that they're already doing and just kind of keep swimming. But for bigger chunks that are going to impact like decisions at the CEO level or leadership level or roll out across the org, I think bringing in a researcher can really help even like bring alignment, navigate those conversations, remove bias, and then a whole process too of like rolling that out to make sure everyone's aligned. It's a little bit easier when someone doesn't have their foot in one of the teams already.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so I think it's more of that structure.
Yeah, people don't say that that's a benefit of bringing an outside
Right.
person in. They won't say that, but that really
Mm-hmm.
is kind of like, hey, it's not me. Like, that's
Yep.
what she found. That's what
Yeah,
customers are
exactly.
saying. The good, the bad, the ugly,
Totally.
it wasn't me saying that this is like this product feature isn't working or this buyer journey isn't working or this messaging. That's her. That's her job. So I totally get that. How large are the companies that you're working with? And then we can close out because this is just me being curious about your work, how it's kind of changed over the year, but how big are the companies?
So right now I'm mostly working with like Series B where they might have like 100 or so folks. I used to do some like Series A startups where the need to like know make decisions with knowledge is really high, but their resources, their budget, their time is really low. And so you kind of have to like fit something small inside of that. There's a meteor problems to solve at that like Series B. So usually like maybe 50, but probably around 100 and folks, and they're at the stage of like maybe shifting a new market. So they've got product market fit in one place. How do we now scale? So now they have resources, they have reason to bring someone in to actually decode or like diagnose what's going on. Yeah, that's kind of my focus.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for sticking with me as I kind of dug into the work that you do and who you do it for. Let's talk about peeling back the layers. And, we talked about this during the course, Beyond the Script, peeling back the layers beyond what people say. They say, you ask them, what's the value you're getting from this product? They're like, oh, it's super easy. Why do you use this tool versus something else? Oh, because it saves me time. How do you peel back layers beyond those logical things and get people to really stop and consider like going back to the usage, going back to the journey, having them stop and really process things in order to give you something that's deeper than some of the things I said? On some of the emotional stuff or politics at work, maybe you can share an example too.
Yeah. So a lot of this is recognizing that people will not have the pretty buttoned up answers that we want. I need a good analogy for this. I don't have one yet, but it's this idea of like you can't just ask what you want. People don't really know why they bought a thing, and that goes for everyone, like myself included. Instead, if you can prepare to help them like unravel the story of how they got to that moment, they don't have to own like, well, this means this, or I care about that, or well, I prioritized comfort over firmness for a mattress. We don't know. We're like living in our experience. If you can almost like take the pressure off of them, that's for you to figure out. And you're going to figure that out by, well, how many times did they look up comfort or read like reviews about comfort versus firmness? And you're going to figure out where in the story that came up and how it came up and like how many arguments did they have about their wife about like, no, like you move a lot. So I need to not have like motion transfer. If you can unpack the events and the little micro moments that tipped ultimately in the favor of deciding to buy, it will give you a narrative that will tell you actually a lot more of what you want in a more nuanced level than like going right at it head on. There'll be details, there'll be emotions. You just go on this whole emotional arc with them. For something that feels fairly like neutral, like a mattress or downloading an app, there are so many little itty bitty crescendos that build up to this larger patterns, larger curve that they decide to ultimately do the thing. And so when we can study for what that is, like what could that potentially be? That might be a lot of me having conversations with the leadership or customer success or anyone that is like frontline customer facing to figure out like, okay, what do we know? Like, how are folks usually operating? Where are they usually going? How are they usually coming to download or buy or click? That will help me figure out how do I direct the story? Because you ultimately want the story. You don't want them to give you the answer. That's the curated version. You want to like, no, let's like, how did we even get here? The example I like to think of is, have you ever had a conversation with a friend and they're like, let's say they had a fight with someone in their life, like a spouse or a partner or a parent, and they might call you and be like super upset. And they're like, I can't believe so and so did this and that. And like, you feel the heat, right? But it's difficult to know, like, you can keep asking, like, wait, but what happened? And they will sort of skip over that and be like, well, they'll rush over a little bit. He said this and da da da. But the point is this, right? There's a really hot button issue, but it's very difficult to participate if you don't get like what was going on. You have to slow them down and figure out like, okay, and then he said what? And then you said this. And then you can actually see that like, oh, maybe they are sort of like overreacting or maybe they're not overreacting, but you can understand like the sensitivity that went into that emotion. Most decisions are hot. Like there's a heated moment that we decide, oh, I'm going to do this thing now. We just like almost desensitize a little bit to the heat. So it's the same concept of like slowing it down. How'd you get here? What happened first? Why did you do this and not that? Why did you say this to that guy and not this thing? Like, why did you respond that way? Like, what happened when? You want the whole narrative. And that exercise of unpacking that, it kind of cuts past the weight of like, why did you buy this thing? It's a very daunting question. I feel like I have to have a right answer. When we unpack the story, that kind of goes away and it just becomes like two people chatting about a thing that happened once, and they invite you into their lives. It's like a very different kind of conversation.
Hey, it's Anna, host of Building with Buyers. I started the show because I found that customers play such an important role in business growth, but they're often overlooked. We're so focused on net new. But the thing that makes you unique is not your product. There are so many companies solving the same problem, and they have customers too. The thing that makes you unique is your superfan customers. That's your moat. Most positioning and messaging is guesswork. I'm a customer insights and strategy advisor, and I help my clients by interviewing their customer superfans and translating those insights into clear and compelling positioning and messaging that specific people care about. So you get deeper engagement with customers and prospects, increased inbound to demos, better sales conversations, increased word of mouth, and closed deals. If you're done guessing, stumbling along, and want to be more customer obsessed, reach out. I'd love to help. And now, back to the episode. Yeah, and that's why some of these conversations take 60 minutes, 90 minutes, right? Especially if it's one of those journeys that are like, well, first I tried it free.
Totally.
And then my trial was done. And then I didn't. And then I came back and then I did the pilot and then that was done. And then some more time lapsed. And it's like, holy cow, so much time. But really getting into this process can get pretty complicated and you can find some of the holes, some of the gaps to improve, I'm just thinking about like a current decision I need to make about a purchase. It's thousands of dollars. And I've kind of been thinking about it for years. And so I'm kind of like a B2B buyer.
Wait, can you share even the category purchase? I'm so curious.
The category is
if you don't want to share the actual purchase.
It's like not furniture. When we did the course, I think I shared, maybe it was furniture or maybe somebody else shared. It's not a course, but it's kind of like workshop style, course style, but more than that. It's a learning journey and I like to get on these. I'm a lifelong learner. So if I'm not doing like actual getting my master's or getting my bachelor's, I'm like, where is the learning? Like I want to continue doing that, right?
I love that.
So I've been thinking about this for years and like reading books on this stuff and following the people. And so there's a lot that goes into this decision and really.
Totally.
And then there's a decision I had to make where I was like, or do I go in that direction with this other track?
Mm-hmm.
And then I had like a couple calls with them. And the reason I didn't pick them is because it doesn't align with how I see myself. Isn't that funny? Sometimes that's what it is. It doesn't align with how I see myself and my value and what I want to put out into the world.
Yeah.
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Now I had to be thoughtful about that. And I'm like, why didn't I go with them? Because I could have, like, they were pretty logical about stuff. They were cheaper. There's more complexity to it. But the main thing was like, it doesn't align. And so that might be the reason that the purchase doesn't go through, because the way that you talk about it doesn't align well with the prospect. And so then they say no.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many layers in like what you just said. It's so hard for me to turn my brain off about this, but it's like there is you going through the experience and like making decisions and maybe even moments you're not reading or looking something up to make a decision. It's like passively kind of clocking in your mind. And then there's you having an awareness of the fact that you're deliberating, or you said no to what would otherwise be like an obvious choice because maybe it's more accessible or inexpensive. And then you're like stepping outside of your process, but looking into it, and you have a sense of like who you are and how that, like, there's so many threads to this, right?
So many. And like some days I just forget about this thing. And some days I'm like thinking about it like, oh, this is a pain. Like I really need to make a decision. Right. And so going back
Mm-hmm.
and forth over months. So I just think about that for my own personal example. But I think that what you said about peeling back the layers, there's so much going on beyond what's logical. And so it's really interesting when you can go deeper. And you can only do that when you take someone through, like, let's go back. Take me through, walk me through the steps. And you and
Yeah.
that person get to these moments of, oh, yeah, I did do that, or I did say that, or I
Mm-hmm.
did reconsider, or I did get annoyed, or whatever it was, right? Politics too. It's like, oh, yeah, I was kind of nervous what my boss would say, or I was kind of, right? All that stuff is, I think, what's missed a lot of times.
Totally, totally. Even it's you were talking about how like painful it was with the decision. You did this like very big sigh. Like there's so much energy, right? And this is what I mean about like decisions have heat. There's a lot of relief that comes out. I think of like those cartoons with the steam squiggles when they're like showing they're angry or like hot. It's like the decision is such a relief moment, and not always because it's like the right decision. There's some like, oh, okay, the pain of the decision is sort of like released. And then there's a lot of anticipation of like what next. And having someone else come in to unpack that with you, it becomes this journey you can both like be on, right? Like you said, that you both have these ahas. You become very invested in their story and their experience, but you're also on the outside. So you keep your bias, but by having proximity, you can actually like uncover something. And often you'll find that folks will be like, oh, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, I did think that, or I wasn't aware I was doing that, but it's true. You know, like they're having these moments of aha too.
Totally. That's why I don't think that like this type of research is going anywhere. Coming back to the conversation we had about AI tools and the human element and the talking and the going on a journey with someone. I guess you could go on a journey with your AI tool. Like people are doing that. There's AI is mimicking empathy. And so you're going on a journey, you're having like these relationships are happening with AI tools,
Totally.
but it's not a real human and it doesn't have the experiences. It's just kind of like saying what's logically the right thing to say,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make the person feel better. So that's different. So yeah, I think that there's like a lot of benefit to having like the human on the other end, taking the person
Totally.
through the journey. What's the worst customer interview you've ever done? I'm just curious
Oh gosh.
because I know you and I both do hours of this stuff. And there's always somebody. And you're like, ah,
So this is I'll say that my most recent. It was with a guy that like first when he joined, it was camera view. Like I'm on Zoom, like landscape view, I guess. And then he comes on like tiny portrait iPhone, can't really see, like it's a little bit distant. His face is a little bit distant. It's like off to the side. So he's not really looking at me, but when he is, he's very much looking down at me. Like the phone is on the very lower part of his view.
was he looking at his computer while like doing work?
No, this was I don't think he even had a computer nearby. He was just like at his desk and the phone was just kind of off to the side a little bit.
To the side. Oh, okay.
So I'm like on his phone view. He's like at first joined and he signed up for an hour and there was an incentive involved. I think maybe it was like 60 or 80
Yeah.
bucks. So like decent. And the first thing he says when I say, I just check, like, are you still okay for a good hour? He's like, well, actually, like, I don't really want to have a conversation. So let's keep it to 30 minutes. So already off the bat, I'm like, oh,
this is going to be a hard one.
It's going to be tough. And he's very like just stoic face. I mean, I'm not having much feedback in terms of body language. It's just not really. And the product is a personal nutrition app. And the conversation was like, just did not really liked the idea of the app, was kind of into it, but just really not like saying things like, I'm really not your target audience. I know more about this domain than you guys should be hiring me. Like really just
Wow.
not into it. And then I kind of persist. There's a little couple of moments where I felt like there was a little moment where I could have like had a bit of discussion or a bit of banter rather that wasn't to do with the thing. I didn't like change my position. I didn't like try to rush the conversation, but I just sort of followed my process and kept going and asking, and he's giving kind of short answers. And I'm like, oh, it's fine. Keep going. And then by the end, we stayed on for like 45 minutes. And I remember at some point in the middle, he kind of cracked, started smiling, like softened a little bit, had some like conversation, like moments where he was just talking, like kind of a lot of run on sentences. And then the conversation was much softer, like he's a bit more smiley. And then says at the end, when I'm like, okay, well, I'll let you go. I'll give you these 15 minutes back. You know, I know you wanted to go sooner. And he says something to the effect of, well, now I'm just getting like into the conversation and you're about to leave. And I was like, okay, well, this is great.
Oh, so he's like, I don't want to go.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, it was such a great moment it was emotionally super uncomfortable, right? Like it's difficult to be on a call with someone who doesn't want to be there. And then you can kind of rest on the laurels of like, well, they're here and this is my job. I'm just going to push through and ask the questions I need to ask. And I remember the feeling of he was giving such short answers, but they were a bit shallow. So I had to like press more. And then you feel like, is he about to snap at me and be like, why do you keep asking these things? Like I've already answered. Or
That's what I've had. I've had the same experience. Like, you just
yeah,
asked me that.
yeah,
And it's like, no, I didn't. I mean, I did, but I'm also just like trying to ask in a slightly different way.
yes, yes. And it's uncomfortable. I mean, this had like a nice happy ending and the kind of sourness in the beginning made it all the better. But it's rough. Like you're definitely not immune to these things. Like it's just being human and having a process helps for sure. You know, it might not feel like that big of a deal when you have the customer and they're super responsive. But the thing is that it's always up to the customer, right? Like how the conversation is going to go in the beginning is up to them. How it ends is really up to you. I think you will always have tricky folks that don't want to talk. They just sign up for the incentive or they like the idea, but maybe they're just not feeling it that day. Or they're just like, you're a stranger. I don't really know you. It can be a whole host of things. So you definitely have to get a bit of thick skin. But again, having a process helps so much, you know, like you just
Totally.
otherwise deer in headlights of my emotions take over and I'm just like, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
So this must not be going well. He actually turned out to be extremely useful
Oh,
conversation, really, really useful interview. And that just kind of was another notch to stack on like it pays to persist.
yeah. With this particular person, like you said, it was really helpful, useful conversation. Did you get some insights from him? How did you know that something was really good and useful? Really, this ties back to like, how do you know something is an actual insight to pay attention to?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I try not to look for insights in a call, right? It's like you want like the good data in a call. The insight is more like the aha you have when you're looking across data. But I know when something is worth paying attention to when there's emotion behind it, either from them or from me. So if they say something that feels like counter to what they said, like I'm like, oh, I'm thinking like, why would they do that? That kind of comes out of nowhere. Or let's say they're like talking about an app and they're totally bashing it, but then they're using it every day. It's like, oh, that doesn't add up. So it's either like my emotion or theirs. So they're feeling really excited, really passionate, really negative, really positive. Or I'm trusting myself like across a few interviews, like, oh, that sounds curious. Like, why did that happen? You know, why did they do this and not that? It's looking at both of those, which will tell me like where to double down, where to press, or where there's something interesting. Once you start doing like for a single project, I find like at the 3 interview mark, you've got enough data there that you will have a lot of aha moments yourself on a call. Like you start making connections and your questions will start changing a little bit because you're able to get to the heart of something a lot faster. And now you're hunting, right? There's not like a open canvas. It's sort of like, oh, I know what I'm looking for.
Yeah. That's such a great point. Like it starts kind of more open canvas.
Yeah.
You did talk to the team. You did kind of talk
Yep.
through like what are some of the areas that we're curious about investigating, trying to improve. But really, it's the point is to start as an open canvas because you don't know what is because they didn't talk to their customers in this
Yeah.
way, right? So you don't know. You're kind of open to it. I love that.
Yeah. And I think it's also like depending on the timeline, like the storyline you want to uncover, it's hard to know how much time to spend in a particular part of the story. Maybe we would assume if we care about figuring out like when someone downloaded an app or bought something, we might assume that the moment, like right up to that moment, is more important, like when they're making trade offs or comparing. But maybe it's like the pre journey that kind of got them even on the path that's more important. So a lot of the early interviews are me figuring out where do I put the weight? Where do I focus? And then you hone questions to like get to something a little bit faster and find the heat. Like I'm just always looking for the energy, you know. If they're kind of talking a bit more blasé, unless I have a reason to go, I'll look for, okay, where's the stickiness? Where's the, oh yeah, the like with little bits of inflection in their tone.
When they're like, yeah, and they get excited. And that's that look for the energy. I love that. Just,
Yeah.
I want to stick it somewhere. I want to like make a painting and just like put it on my wall and say, look for the energy. Cause I think that like is helpful for all parts of life. You got
Yeah,
to look for the energy, right?
totally, totally.
But especially for this customer research.
Yeah, because they don't also know. They'll tell you where the energy's over here, and then they'll react to something totally different, right? It's a lot of these like throwaway comments too. So with insights, it's like just constantly paying attention to how the energy can manifest, right? We can look for like something loud, but sometimes it's like softer. And the fact, the language that they use can be quite heated, but they're saying it like total straight face, you know? So the more blank you are, the better you can see what they're putting out. Whereas the more bias you have, the harder it is to see, right? So that being kind of open and like nurturing your own, like sort of directing your own bias towards them as opposed to like finding something in particular is really important.
It's really important to not go back to like look for the thing that the team believes is the thing that they want to come out of these conversations
Yeah,
because
totally.
you're not trying to, that's not the point. The point is to come blank slate. You're learning. The customer is the expert. You're trying to just like help dig out what is the insight and not like confirm that the team
Yes.
that you're working with is correct about certain things, right? That's also tricky. And the other thing that you had mentioned about look for the energy. One of the things I talk about is look for the patterns, but look like after 3, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you notice some of the patterns keep coming
Yep.
up, but also look for the weird stuff. Like, wait, I thought you
Mm-hmm.
were saying going in this direction, but then we completely changed direction. And now you're talking about something else and you have a lot of energy around this. That's
Yes.
something to pay attention to. So look for
Perfect.
the
Yep.
patterns and look for the weird. Just to make it more concrete, like an example of if you can think of something like maybe with a recent client, turning an insight into an action. Like we found out X, that's a big insight. Now we're going to turn it into like what action? What can you think of that's kind of fits that?
Yeah. So there's a client I'm working with, and they have, so this was also like product informing product strategy. And with product strategy, it's like, okay, what specific features would lead to higher retention versus folks that are kind of, or if folks are dropping off, what features are kind of, where are we losing them? So one of the things that came up was like in this particular app, there were instances where the folks wanted like support or reinforcement for a decision they were making. And the app is very much tied into like they do use a lot of gamification to help people like keep using it. And so this was a great validation of like, well, what kind of gamification would be helpful? If people want support, maybe it's like positive reinforcement. Maybe it's some sense of like reward or what do rewards look like? I've also had insights that turn into action could be focusing the app on like, well, cutting certain features that maybe don't serve the core users. Also found like this client, they had a way that they were advertising the app, but everybody that came in through the app that way was like half of them were dropping off and half of them were sticking around. So they sort of closed those campaigns altogether because it was encouraging too much drop off and like repositioned entirely. The action piece, I think, has to happen. Like having the conversation of action should usually come before we even do any of the research so that you can pin it back. And then you can actually be like, well, we've got a lot of folks that want support. They want reinforcement. They like the encouragement to keep using the app. So let's double down on X, Y, and Z to help with that. I will typically give like windows of action of like focus more on this, less on that, advance this, remove that, like kind of more bucket wide. And then the specifics inside of that will be sort of the team. Because I think that the translation of the research is a whole separate beast. So staying in the court of like, well, here's where the parameters of what they want and don't. And you have a loose sense of features or even campaigns. I've also had instances where the action might look like changing messaging hierarchy because we know that folks are coming in with a certain mindset. So the homepage, like that hero section needs to reflect that. It's those kinds of things. Like sometimes it can be more granular, but a lot of times it's more like strategy, like where should you focus? What should be priority? Does that answer your question?
It does. And I like how you brought up the buckets where it's not like, okay, we found this insight and now we must do this. It's like the window, the bucket of less on this, more over here, because this is backed by the research. This is what I heard. So I really
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Kind of like helping to maneuver the team in the right direction on what to focus on and what not to focus on.
Yeah, I have one more example that I think is a good one for this, where we've done some research and found that like most of the folks for this company they had a SaaS product, and most of the folks coming in were like through an internal referral as opposed to cold outreach. And so the implication was, well, either you can like keep going with cold outreach and double down. Maybe that's a takeaway they have. But another takeaway could be like, you should totally leverage more internal referrals or like a partner program or affiliate program, like optimizing that or and then that becomes the business strategy. Like the insight is internal referrals is most of the way that folks are coming in. And then how you apply that was where like I presented both and then the team kind of figures out where they want to focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of bring it back to like, well, we're all here to discuss the different ways that we're maybe already doing that and need to double down
Yes,
on it or new ways that we need to do it. I love that.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. One of the things I noticed when I've been doing research with customers, clients' customers, is they're starting to talk about the usage of AI tools. And I'm just curious if you've been hearing that as you take them down the journey and through their process. Does AI kind of come into play? And are you hearing about that more or not? Because I actually had a really great conversation with the author of a book called How AI Changes Your Customers. I have it right here by
Ooh.
Mark Schaefer. Yeah, it's actually really interesting. He's a futurist. And so, like, 300 futurists got together and talked about how AI is changing your customers. And I was like, this is so relevant for the show, right? For me, for
Hmm.
the work that we do. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, do you have any thoughts on this? Have you heard in your conversations people talk about AI tools?
Not too much in the actual project itself. Like it might be out of curiosity in the beginning, or if they're sharing how their team is currently going about using AI for bouts of research. But I don't find that comes up like while I'm doing a project as much. I'm curious when you said like usage of AI, like what kinds of content, like how does that come up in your experience?
So, in my experience, when I ask about the tool, right, because I'm helping this company with typically the work I do is around positioning, messaging, go to market
Hmm.
strategy. And so we're trying to figure out the value of the product, what other tech tools they're using as part of their work, as part of their work day, work week.
Right.
And so to get to that goal of whatever they need to get done, right? This tool is part of other tools that they're using, just like you and I, we're using multiple tools. And so they're starting to bring up AI tools as part of the work that they're doing. And this is across industries. I'm hearing this across industries. So could be in dev tech, could be in ed tech, right? Because everyone's got access. And if you're open to learning and using, and plenty of even teachers, in education there. So it's been fascinating to hear about that. And also coupled with this book, which there's another podcast episode that I'll be releasing on, it is actually changing people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it ties back into the work that we do, because we can't really assume that our customers are the same as they used to be, which makes the work that we do that much more important.
Yeah.
Because your customers changed, but you haven't. You've kept everything kind of the same, right?
Right.
And so your positioning, messaging, strategy stuff, even product too, right, isn't matching up to what the expectations are from and like the experience of your customers. So that to me is interesting. I like to kind of wrap this up if there is time, and there is a little bit of time. I asked you a ton of stuff, and we had a great conversation talking about the subject matter that I love and you love, obviously. I want to open it up, and if you have any questions for me.
I would love to know, how is it for you with clients, and in terms of like, what are companies asking for with respect to research? Has that shifted for you? Have you found any like trends or?
I think there's a shift. I think there's a shift. I'm trying to pinpoint exactly what the shift is for, because, I've been doing this work for 5+ years, and there's shifts every year. And so I do feel it. I think there is a shift. And that's why I was so curious to hear how you're helping companies and how you're doing more of like that product research, which is so fascinating, because I always thought that the product people were doing it, right? I'm a marketer. And there's a product person, and they're doing that research, and that's fine. And I'll do the research but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've been thinking about it the wrong way, right? Research is research, and research needs to ladder up to what does the business need? And that could be marketing. That could be sales. That could be customer success. That could be, right, that retention stuff. That could be product.
Totally.
And so from our conversation, I was like, oh man, maybe I'm pigeonholing myself, right? Because maybe that's not necessarily the big pain right now, is the research for positioning messaging. Maybe the big pain lies somewhere else. But research isn't going away, and research isn't going to be taken over by AI tools, because this is like, as we talked about for almost an hour, this is very hard stuff. This is very human critical thinking skills stuff. And we should not give this stuff away to AI tools. So
I totally agree.
So that's kind of what's been on my mind. I don't think that positioning messaging is any less important. I don't think websites and how you talk about yourself and your, narrative and story is any less important. I just think that priorities shift. And so being in tune with like what that is, that's why it was super helpful to talk to you, Hannah. So awesome.
This was fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much. I loved to see you. It's been quite a while. I'm so glad that you finally joined me. It just goes to show that you have to keep asking if you want somebody to collaborate with, and then they'll say yes, because I was so annoying.
No, you weren't at all. You honestly weren't, but thank you for being patient with me.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. And if anybody wants to find Hannah, she is on LinkedIn, Hannah Shamji. And I thank you once again, Hannah. This was awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Building with Buyers. New episodes drop weekly, so make sure you're following wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on LinkedIn, Anna Furmanov. Visit my website to learn more about how to turn customer insights into positioning and messaging your buyers will understand. FurmanovMarketing.com. And don't forget to leave a review if you're loving the show.